Hello, everyone. It's that Weems guy here for another episode. We're going to have a good time tonight. Not that we don't always have a good time on the show. Uh, yes, I'm aware that there may be some audio visual issues with this episode. We're getting some feedback and some other things. I'm sitting in my kitchen. I don't know what else anybody would expect from me. It's it's not like this is a professional production by any means. A couple of weeks ago, Mr. Ernest Langdon and his company released a video basically promoting what is correctly called traditional double action. It's not DASA, it is TDA. Um, Traditional double action pistols, and I posted the video in the show group, and Mr. Karl Rehn responded, "Well, TDA maybe not be the best thing for people with small hands," and I'm paraphrasing here, not an accurate quote. Um, and so that just got me to thinking. I reached out to both gentlemen. It's like, would y'all like to come on and do an episode where we just talk about it in a reasonable manner? And both of them were willing to do that. I'm going to have each of them introduce themselves, and I'm going to go in the clock order that's showing on my screen. Ernest, if you would, I know this is your first time on the show, so welcome aboard.
It is my first time on the show. Ernest Langdon. I am the CEO of a company called Langdon Tactical. I've been in the firearms industry for a really long time. I originally I had my first full-time firearms instructor position in 1989. So I've been doing this stuff for a really long time. But I am a gun guy, and that's what I do now is play with guns and try to figure out how to make guns better and, you know, you know, put a good product out for our customers.
And if I remember correctly, you won a national championship shooting a traditional double action, did you not?
I have won quite a few national championships shooting traditional double action. I think all but one of my 10 national championships are with TDA guns.
Okay.
So production nationals in 2000, so USPSA, IDPA as well.
Okay.
A couple of Steel Challenge uh, wins in California as well.
All right. Now, that was originally with a P220 SIG. Now you're with the shooting Berettas, right?
No, my first six were all with Beretta 92s.
Mhm.
And then I switched to a 220 in 2000, late 2002, and I won the 2003 Custom Defensive Pistol Division IDPA with the 220. And I wanted to shoot that division because my buddies were all going, well, if you had to shoot a 45, a man's gun, I was like, okay, let's shoot a 45. And the 220, it was a 220 stainless. To be fair, it was the steel frame version of the gun, not the aluminum frame version of the gun. But yeah, I won that championship. Actually, won a bunch of matches that year with that gun. Was trying to make a point.
There you go. There you go. All right. Carl?
Karl Rehn, KR Training. I've been teaching people since 1991. Started shooting matches back in 1988. Most of my time, I spend 150 some odd days on the range every year these days, mostly working with what Tiffany and Akil call gateway students. I get a lot of people that are buying their first gun or getting their first carry permit or wanting to learn how to draw from a holster or C and D class shooters shooting, USPSA or Steel Challenge style matches. So I interface as much as I would prefer to be sometimes up at the top end of the pool. The local market is very much a pyramid where the largest base of the customers are down at that bottom end in the casual, occasional shooter, recreational gun owner kind of area. So my perspective on things is skewed from those that teach, only teach ultra high motivated, they're a B class level person wanting to get to M or GM, and they're willing to put in a ridiculous amount of work to get there. It's a different kind of person. So most of my comments are probably skewed toward my perspective of, anytime somebody comes to one of my classes with a traditional double action gun, I sort of wince and go, okay, this is going to be 18 times more work, and they're going to have a much harder time doing anything than anybody else in class. And so that's, that's where I come from on this.
All right. And you are a multiple division grandmaster in the SPSA, aren't you?
Yeah, I don't shoot at that level anymore. They've raised the GM standards a couple times, and they've uh, out of reach at my point in time. But yeah, there was a period where I was, really into it and shot really well. Not with a TDA gun. I own two. I own a Beretta Vertec, and I own a Smith and Wesson 459 that I bought because it was the gun that was at the Miami FBI Miami shootout for my historical handgun stuff that I do. But do I get them out of the safe and shoot them? No, rarely. Only if I have to.
All right. My TDA experience was I went to the police academy in 1999 with an issued Smith& Wesson 4006. Shot that gun throughout the police academy and probably for the first year or two out of the academy. And then kind of a funny sequence of events. I was having malfunctions at the range, and the armor took my 4006 and completely rebuilt it. New extractor, new plungers, everything throughout this gun. And then a month later, we bought new Smith& Wesson 4006s. And so I was able to buy that gun. I have no idea how many rounds went through it because, you know, it was, it had been issued and used so much that it was worn out by the time I got it. I think the agency adopted those in 94. Like I said, I went through the academy in 99. So early 2000s, somewhere in there, the agency bought new Smith& Wesson 4006s. And obviously I got that when I went through my first firearms instructor, and that was an 80-hour law enforcement firearms instructor course in 2003, shooting that 4006. Ultimately, I ended up going through Smith& Wesson's Armorer School on that platform, and it was at that class, they gave us a special purchase certificate that you could come back and buy one gun at the wholesale price. And so I came back and tried to order a 5906 TSW because I wanted a 9 millimeter for obvious reasons. And when I called Smith& Wesson, this was just about the time the MMP had been released, or just after that. And when I called the number on the certificate, and I would like to order a 5906 TSW, please. Sir, we've discontinued the third generation pistols. But can we tell you about this MMP that we now offer? And the chief had just told me that we needed to buy 20 more pistols because we got into new positions and stuff. And I hung up the phone and immediately went to his office and said, "Hey, Smith just told me they've discontinued the third generation Smith, and they have 22. I think it was 22 4006s left in the vault from the California Highway Patrol contract they had just filled." And so ultimately, the chief let me start experimenting, and I ended up writing, along with another instructor, a proposal that switched us to Glock. But at that point in time, I was 7 years in uh, with the 4006. And so I've got a pretty good amount of water under my bridge with the platform, although I would readily concede that the third generation Smith is not the best example of a traditional double action pistol out there. Um, but I did spend a considerable amount of time, several years there teaching brand new hires that we were going to be sent into the academy that had just come out of the academy. So I had the government funded gateway student with the 4006 there. Then, basically when Glock took over the law enforcement market, I went for years without seeing one in a cop class. Um, didn't see many in private sector. And then as I started doing more of the open road stuff, open enrollment stuff on the road, started seeing a resurgence of them a little bit in the last couple of years. So I've seen what's kind of going on in the market out there with them now from that perspective. But enough of me yammering. Ernest, give us a selling point on the TDA.
Well, I think in my opinion, the biggest selling point on a TDA gun is I've trained a lot of new students as well. Um, my second full-time job as a firearms instructor was what I would call an anti-terrorism shooting school that the Marine Corps ran at Quantico. This would have been in the early 90s. And we taught basically for all intents and purposes, relatively new students. Like, yes, they qualified at the range kind of stuff, and they were mostly officers, but some people from other places. And most of the students, unless they were from a federal agency coming through the program, they were shooting an M9 in the class. So we taught them how to shoot TDA guns or shoot the Beretta for years. So I did that quite a bit. But what I would say is the number one reason that I think TDA guns are better for most people is because, we have a tendency to say that, I don't have time to train people for all of the double action trigger pulls. But I do have time to train people to keep their finger off the trigger when they shouldn't have it on there. And I can tell you from my experience of teaching a lot of people, I don't even know how many thousands at this point, under duress, once you stress them out, you start doing force on force, you start saying the boogeyman's around the corner, all of those kind of things, the finger creeps onto the trigger. It starts going in, it feels comfortable, it wants to make sure, I call it trigger checking because I've seen people do it. I can't even tell you how many thousands of times I've seen people do it. And the striker fired gun, especially these days, my concern there is that the community has gone down the path of requiring a better and better trigger on their striker fired guns. They need a lighter, crisper trigger, and that's what the market is demanding. So we have right now, outside of Glock, the majority of the new striker fired guns that are coming out today are fully tensioned strikers, meaning the striker's cocked all the way to the rear, and they are basically 1911s cocked with no thumb safety and no grip safety. Because once your finger's on the trigger, you've got very little movement and very little pressure required to fire the gun. And my contention is that under duress, once your finger's on that trigger, the two big things that people make mistakes are startle response and bilateral sympathetic pull, right? These things, you teach the stuff, right? So startle response, that finger's on the trigger and something goes bang, or they slip, major muscle group grip, and that finger moves, the gun goes bang. Something, jumps at the end of the hallway, whatever it is, and they're scared, the gun fires. And then bilateral sympathetic pull, they got their hand on the gun, their fingers on the trigger, and they're reaching to grab something else, to grab somebody and pull them, to open a door, whatever that is, the gun fires. And there's just documentation through the roof that we know this happens, right? And there are people that have been killed. There are police officers that are in jail because they had an accidental discharge and shot and killed somebody. And the agency said, well, we told you to keep your finger off the trigger. It's your fault. You get to get prosecuted. So with a traditional double action gun, that first pull takes a lot more movement and more of an assertive effort, okay? And it doesn't have to be a 10, 12 pound trigger pull. It can still be a light, smooth trigger pull, because the distance your finger moves is what keeps you out of trouble. It's not the weight, right? You having a really long, first intentional first shot forces you to know that I'm doing this on purpose, right? And so for that, in my opinion, for that transitional student that hasn't really trained that much, when they go to grab their gun off of the nightstand in the middle of the night, and this is another one, they're grabbing this gun and their finger goes straight onto the trigger, and it's a single action trigger for all intents and purposes. It's short, light, crisp, relatively easy to pull. And again, it doesn't have to be that light. If you look at the statistics from NYPD and the accidental discharges that they have with the New York trigger, which is extremely heavy, the distance is what causes the problem. It's a short distance. The weight doesn't really help them that much. It doesn't prevent the accidents from happening. So And then after you pull that trigger, okay, because you're making the decision to make the shot, you're aligning the gun, you're getting your grip, all the things that are going on. After that, you've got arguably a better trigger than you can ever put on a striker fire gun. So when you need to shoot fast and accurate at speed to put bullets exactly where you need them to be, you have a significantly better trigger at that point. Does it take a little bit more time to train somebody to do that? Sure, it does. It does. It takes a little bit more time, but a little bit of effort of understanding, getting people to groove in on how to pull that first trigger pull, and then just remember to decock as an automatic when they come back. Pull a double action, go to the prep point, come back, decock, pull a double, pull a single, come back, decock. The same drills that you would run when you're teaching somebody to present and align the gun, you just ensure that they do all of those with the double action trigger pull. Now, if it's a bone stock gun, right, or it's a gun they went and they bought, I don't know what brand you wanted to use, a stock 4006 that they got at the pawn shop that has a 10-pound double action trigger pull, it's going to take a lot more effort. And then that person that is weaker and has smaller hands, they're going to have to deal with that. But most of the guns that we're putting out have a 6.5-pound double action trigger pull, 7-pound double action trigger pull, which is the same weight as a right in line with the weight of a stock factory Glock. It's just longer.
I had a thought pop into my head as you were saying that, and I'm sitting there trying to think now. Is it harder to train people to do that clean double action trigger pull like comes on your pistols? Is that any harder to do that than it is to teach them to take up the slack to the prep point on a good Glock trigger and press the trigger rather than just crashing through it?
I don't think
It
so.
is when they can't reach the trigger,
Yeah.
which
I'm,
happens
I,
more
I,
often than I think y'all realize.
yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know what guns you're dealing with. I've got, a lot of people that work with me, including some young ladies that shoot DA traditional double action guns just fine, primarily the PX4, which is a much smaller gun than our traditional Beretta. And of course, the Vertec has got a much smaller grip on it as well. But the PX4s, we've got a little lady that works for us, a lady, she's like 20, well, she's 21 now, I think, that works in the shipping department, and she competes and practices with a PX4 all the time, shooting double action. She doesn't have any problem at all. The probably potentially the issue there is if you're talking about someone with tiny hands. Yeah, I mean, if they're getting small hands, or then that's going to think, normal size female hands or medium size, or men's hands are going to be, I believe they can shoot them just fine. There are exceptions to that, so the gun does have to fit the person. So if they can't reach the trigger and have a proper grip, then yeah, that is definitely potentially a problem there. But there are ways to work around that with the gun, but there are some people that are not going to be able to deal with that.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
I
I'm just
can't
there.
argue against it. Some people's hands are too small. Some people's hands are too small to hold onto a Glock and reach the trigger right as well.
That's
Correct.
true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so when you're training Marines, young fit men or ladies with 100 pounds of grip strength in each hand, the trigger pull and the length, all those things, when I'm dealing with 70 and 80-year-old people that literally can't pull the trigger on a double action revolver, uh, they can't make the gun shoot 6 times in a row. Uh, and that's not everybody, but so let me give you the profile of the typical person that brings a traditional double action gun to my class. There's two versions of it. We'll start with the worst case, and perhaps I'll be accused of being sexist, but this is what I saw a lot in the 90s when Texas carry permit was a thing. So couple shows up, husband has a $3,000 Wilson Combat 1911 with a 2-pound trigger. His wife has a Ruger P89 that he bought for her at the gun show because, quote unquote, she doesn't like shooting. Well, then she can't reach the trigger and she can't pull the trigger. And then on the Texas concealed carry shooting test, 23 of the 50 shots has to be fired, starting with the gun decocked. Well, here's how they practiced when they went to the range. they would take the unloaded gun out of the box, they put the magazine in, they rack the slide, they shoot all their shots single action, never practicing using the decocker, never practicing using the double action. And they do not understand how the gun is intended to be used and absolutely don't intend how it was to be carried. I let another instructor use my range a couple of years ago, and one of his assistants had some kind of traditional double action gun in their holster with the hammer back, with no decocker. And I asked this person, I said, don't you realize that's mechanically unsafe? This person was teaching other people and didn't know that. I know it's rampant in the Texas concealed carry training world for most instructors that run the firing line not to require people with those guns to decock, because it's hard and it affects their scores. And so rather than force them to use the gun the way it was designed, I get a lot of students that have the traditional double action guns. If they didn't do carry permit with me, I asked them, said, did your carry permit trainer require you to decock every time the gun went back to ready? And they said, oh no. And so the part of the problem is they don't practice correctly because they don't know what they don't know. And then when they encounter the additional complexities of running the decocker and the double action trigger, well, they don't like it because it makes them slow and they shoot bad. I've got a guy that comes to my Wednesday night matches, and God bless him, he runs a Beretta and he's determined to run that traditional double action gun. And I RO'd him on every stage, multiple strings, and I swear he missed every first shot, shooting a 6-inch plate at 10 yards. Once he got to the single action trigger, he kicked ass. But and he's a good shooter generally across the board. But even at that level, he's got a deficiency. And so if you have motivated people you're training for 24 to 40 hours, you can do a lot, particularly when you can tell them you must do this way. When I get them for 3 hours or 6 hours or 8 hours, if I'm not standing right over them, they are all going to cheat the double action. And
sure.
I'm going to break the internet for you, Lee, because we need to do that. If USPSA changed their rule so that you had to decock the traditional double action gun each time you move to a new shooting position, I believe that the popularity of some of the traditional double action guns that are out there now would evaporate overnight. That if it wasn't, if they shot a 30-round course of fire and they had,
it's not going to happen, but they don't require the 1911 guys to put their gun back on safe either.
They don't, but I'm just saying that in terms of people that buy the resurgence of the traditional double action guns, where I see it is people that shoot matches. And they shoot matches, and they do that because there's advantages to those guns when you have one long trigger press and 29 easy ones, right?
Instead of one bad trigger the whole time.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, Ernest, to your point,
wanted to kind of follow on what he said. I mean, the first part of it is that, the guy walking around, the thing that popped in my head, the guy walking around with the hammer cocked on a traditional double action gun, you said that's mechanically unsafe. And I agree with you. But how is that different than a fully tensioned striker gun in a holster?
Oh, it may not be.
Yeah, it's the same thing. Yeah. The difference is you can't see that it's cocked. So the pejorative we have said, well, it's fine. I mean, it looks fine. I can't tell the difference, but so it can be fully cocked, and we can have a really light trigger pull on it, and that's okay, because nobody can see the hammer's cocked. But when we are walking around and we see a traditional double action gun with a hammer back, we're like, oh my gosh, that's unsafe. And it's like, it's not any different than a fully tensioned striker gun. That's number one. Number two, the reality that we have right now, and I truly believe this to my core, there are so many people out there that are firearms instructors that have never had to teach anybody with a traditional double action gun at all. And so they don't know how to do it. And so they just avoid it. They don't have the competency to teach someone how to run a traditional double action gun, and they assume that it is hard. And there's plenty of guys out there that are doing it. And what I'm going to say is it's as hard as you want to make it. If you believe that it's hard and you believe that it's difficult, and your firearms instructor goes, oh my gosh, that long double action trigger pull, that's going to be really hard, you're not going to be good with that. then you're right. It's a
Well,
self.
I don't tell them that. I just
I'm not
observe
saying you
the
tell them
matches.
that,
I'm not
Karl.
teaching. I'm just,
I'm not saying you tell them that, but
yeah.
people are coming to you with bad habits already.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Trust me,
yes.
I know. I see guys all the time. I've had customers of mine that come up and they go, "Oh, I love my Langdon Beretta that I got from you." They'll be at meet at a show or something, and they shoot the gun, and they'll come back to the ready position, and I'm like, "Decock the gun." He was like, "What?"
Right.
And I'm like, "Shoot the gun double action." He was like, "Oh yeah, I never shoot a double action." And I'm like, it's exactly what you said. They go to the range, they stick a mag in it, they rack it, they shoot everything single action, and then they put in the slide forward, put it in the box, and they never run it double action at all. And they're missing one of the most beautiful parts of the work we do, which is the double action. They don't even understand what we've done. And like, all you're doing is looking at the single action. Is it better than stock? Yeah, it's better than stock, but I can only go so far before it gets
Right.
dangerous. But the double action is where we make the big difference. And so you're 100% correct. But those two things is the hammer backed on a DASA gun in reality is no different than a lot of the guns that what people are carrying anyway. And so few firearms instructors out there, because we've grown up in the last, it's been like 30 years now that Glock has been the number one firearm in the police departments. So few firearms instructors know how to teach people how to pull a double action trigger pull. They just don't know how to do it. And it's really not that hard, because prior to that, back when we were all still shooting wheel guns, we pulled double action trigger pulls all the time. And we were really good at it, by the way. Guys were
Right.
shooting, B-20 or B-27s at 50 yards and drilling teeny tiny little holes, all double action every single time.
Yeah.
Back then, guys had to qualify it at further distances. And the two departments that I was on, we only had to shoot like reserve, we only had to shoot a handful of rounds at 25 yards. And it was like, let's move up. Like, you could basically miss everything at 25 and still qualify.
Right.
So anyway,
I run
I
the
just
old
want to get on
FBI.
we can do a better job as a firearms instructors teaching people and making them understand how to run these guns.
Mm-hmm. The thing about the instructors was a point that I was going to get to tonight. But Karl said something that I found very amusing that proves both sides of this. Karl, if USPSA also, and Ernest said it too, if USPSA also adopted the rule that single action only shooters had to put the safety on between moving every firing position, you'd see those go away too.
You'd see that a drop as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it's a little bit faster to put the thumb safety on and put it back, depending on the gun.
Oh yeah.
But either way, it's an extra task, and an extra task is a fraction of a second, and that's
Yeah.
the timings now between the top shooters are so tight
Right.
that any extra task is going to be a problem.
Yeah.
And it would
And
change.
they're typically doing other things during movement anyway. They
Yeah.
have other things they have to do, reloading the gun and all that kind of
Mhm.
stuff. And the really good guys, to say that they have to decock every time they move when they're transitioning to shoot another target already, it's like, when do you want me to decock? I'm like, already
Yeah.
on another target.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I'm
Yeah.
talking about like
Yeah.
movements of more than 3 steps,
Yeah.
not like a wall where you're moving down a wall or whatever. It's just one of those things that just occurs to me. We've had, talking about negative outcomes a little bit. I've had students have negligent discharges because they had their finger on the trigger while they were fumbling with the decocker, and the trigger, you mentioned it earlier, the sympathetic movement, and they've done that. I've had one person at a match have a negligent discharge while trying to manually lower the hammer on a alleged traditional double action gun that's really not, that people misuse in USPSA matches.
Mm-hmm.
And
I know where you're going there. Yeah, I agree.
and at a match that I wasn't at and didn't run, we had a master class shooter shoot himself in the leg because he took the safety off on his single action gun in the holster, because like you said, everyone raised on Glock doesn't understand how to run the single action guns
Yeah.
either. They don't understand
I
when
was
the
going to get
safety
to
comes
that.
off. And so there's a whole generation that was raised
Yeah.
on striker fired guns that do not know any of the old manual of arms. and consequently aren't teaching
Mhm.
it to others. And the person that I talked to that was there said, oh, well, right after it happened, they took a poll of all the M and GM shooters at the match and said, when is it okay to take the safety off? And most of them said, oh, it's okay to do it in the holster. And all of those people were Glock striker fired era vintage people that had
Mhm.
never taken a class from a professional trainer running a single action pistol. So they
Yeah.
never were taught. And apparently in RO class, they don't teach it anymore, or they didn't pay attention, or they were looking at their
Yeah.
phone when it came up. But not that that ever happens, right? But yeah, you're
Well,
correct that the
everything that you're bringing up is goes back to a lack of training and understanding of how guns work, and which I 100% agree with. And that is a
Mhm.
common thing. And I think that everyone here is a gun guy, right? For
Yeah.
sure.
yeah,
Um, and a lot of people are not gun guys. And I think that our community, the firearms community, is not nearly as educated as it used to
Mhm.
be when it came to how guns actually work. But I would argue, being, I've
Mhm.
been doing this for, I don't even want to do the math on how many years now. We're pushing 40 years being around guns. I shot small bore in high school, so that's how long I've been doing this, right? The the number of people that are in the firearms community, I think, is significantly higher now than when I first got into it. There's
oh
way
yeah,
more people shooting matches. There's way more people carrying guns. There's way more
Mhm.
people buying guns. And just didn't see this when I was younger. So there's a lot more people out there, but I think the onus is upon us. I mean, it's one of the reasons we have our whole, I don't know if you've seen our whole Discover website, where it's basically just a free educational platform that we're putting out there to try to help people understand kind of those first steps, how to think about things,
That's great.
even stuff that's like before you decide to buy a gun. Like, what is the things that you should be thinking about? How should you talk about preparedness? Let's talk
Yeah.
about, you know, um, situational awareness. Let's talk about all of these
Mhm.
things, and let's walk you into, then maybe eventually you want to have a gun. But, a lot of us, a lot of people, and I have to realize this, I grew up as a gun guy from a very young age. I mean,
Mhm.
I got a 410 for Christmas when I was 9 years old. And I could walk out into the backyard and go hunting in the right season. And I mean, you couldn't do that anymore. Like,
Yeah.
probably had 22 shells in my pocket going to elementary school because
Right.
the way things were. But that doesn't happen anymore. I mean, it's taboo. It's a bad thing. So my point is, our culture, my experience as a gun guy is way different than what people are going to get exposed to now. And I, as an instructor and as a person that's trying to get information across, have to understand that. The point that I'm trying to make is, for that person that is scared, okay, if they grab that gun in the middle of the night and they're going to see what the boogeyman is doing, okay, I am more concerned about them, their safety, and their potentially their family safety and all that kind of stuff, because they've got their finger on the trigger on a relatively short trigger pull in the middle of
Mhm.
the night because they're scared. And I would much rather them, I'm not saying it's okay to do it, I'd much rather have them their finger on the trigger of a almost 3/4 of an inch trigger pull, full weight the whole way through, than a relatively light trigger pull and short trigger pull, because that's when the bad things happen. That's when people end
Yeah.
up, making the news and all that kind of stuff, because they, shot their son that was sneaking back in, or their daughter that was sneaking back in, or
Mhm.
the Down syndrome kid from down the street that was trying to go to the wrong house. Like, there's horror stories out there because people are afraid, got their finger on the trigger, and they're making bad decisions. The other piece of it is, I have 3 friends of mine that are cops that carried Berettas on duty,
Mhm.
um, and all of them are big TDA fans. And there's a common theme. The common theme is, all of them went at it during and after an incident, went to holster their Beretta, and they could not get their thumb snap to snap, because they had already started pulling the trigger and the gun was at half cock. And they all, to a man, go, that's the reason I like traditional double action guns. Because if I'd have been carrying a Glock, and all of them were relatively young police officers when this happened to them, if I'd have been carrying a Glock, I'd have shot somebody that didn't need to be shot.
Okay.
Okay, so that longer trigger pull will keep your ass out of trouble. And
I'm
here's
with
the
you on
thing.
that.
Here's the thing. When we start talking about being able to shoot fast, one of the issues we have, the pejorative we all want to look like a hero on the range, right? We all want to shoot really, really well. We all want to burn it down. We all want to do these things. But at the end of the day, we are the good guys, okay? We have to have what I used to preach to my young Marines, moral courage, meaning we have to make sure we're right. The bad guy has to force us to shoot him.
Sure.
Okay. And we're so focused on how fast we can do it. And we can go now and start looking at video after video after video of police officers and civilians shooting people that don't need to be shot because they come out of the holster, their finger goes straight to the trigger and they go bang.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of them. There's a bunch of them.
The hiccup in your scenario is this. Well, it's a two-pronged thing. As the number of hours, number one, I wrote a book about this and I've presented on it off and on. The truth is that only about 1% of people that get carry permits in any state bother to attend any training beyond the state minimum, that they do not think they need it, or they don't care, or it's not available to them. In most cases, it's plenty available, even if just on YouTube videos, but they're not interested in it. And so as the number of hours that people get with students in Texas, it went from 15 to 10 to 6 down to now. If I get people for 2 hours to finish their carry permit training, the problem is convincing someone that purchased the traditional action gun. Many of them start out from the philosophy, well, I'm not going to put a round in the chamber until I need one. And so what it's some variants of your scenario, which is a valid scenario, they pick up the gun off the nightstand and the first thing they do is rack the slide. Now the gun is in single action mode. Why? Because that's how they practiced on the range, and they're not comfortable enough with the decocker. The hammer goes down and like, oh my God, the gun's going to fire. That's scary. And so they run an empty chamber, and then they defeat the whole value, because again, there's not time or opportunity in these carry permit classes that the state has us. The people come in and they're like, when can I go? What's the least number of rounds that I have to shoot? What is the minimum score that I have to get? When can you sign my paper and send me on my way? And they're not receptive, many of them, to the idea of you need to actually understand these things. And it's unfortunate, and it's a byproduct of a lot of things that have happened with gun rights and with gun culture generally, but that's in certain sense the value that the TDA gun might have gets thwarted by the end user and their choice to use the gun in a totally different way. Does that make sense? So
I mean, it does, but at the end of the day, we're still in the same situation. If that's what they end up doing, it might as well have a clock. It doesn't make any difference. You're right, because it's still where they might have any other striker part gun with a short light trigger, they're in the same position. So if their decision is that they're not going to put a round in the chamber until they think that there is a threat, okay, then
there are more of those people out there than I
but
realize.
they're basically, we're the same thing as the holster comment. We're in the same boat now.
Yep.
Yeah. So, and again, if we want to base our decisions and what we're telling people to do on the people that want to do the very minimum and seek the least amount of training, then, I mean, obviously that is a thing. I don't want to make decisions, and I don't want to have my customers make decisions on the least amount of training and the least amount of knowledge possible. If that's the attitude, first of all, they're likely not my customers, and they're likely not my students. But people that are going to want, if they're going to go, hey, I'm going to do the least amount of things, then they might as well go buy a whatever that high point or something like that and be done with
Right.
it.
Yeah.
One of the reasons
To
this
get what
topic
we get.
interests me is I was recently invited and accepted an invitation. I'm now on the NRA's Education and Training Committee, and we're looking at changes that need to be made to the NRA curriculum. And I think this, how to operate that particular type of gun is an area that maybe needs to be covered differently and better because the NRA curriculum is used in many states for the mandatory training. And so as a result of our conversation tonight, I'm adding that to my list of things that probably needs to get improved because that NRA basic pistol course may literally be the only training that person ever gets. And if you spend too much time on online forums, you encounter a lot of people that's the extent of their knowledge. They will post incessantly. I'm sure Lee has listeners that fall into that category. And I'm sure you've had customers that fall into that category as well.
Sure. I mean, that is definitely a thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I think all of us here probably, have mixed feelings about the NRA and some of the things that have happened over the years. I went to every NRA program I could get into when I was stationed at Quantico because we hosted the classes and they were all for free. So,
Yeah.
by hosting them, I could have the list of certificates I have from the NRA is insane, and NRA headquarters is right there in Virginia. So it
Sure.
was
Well, they have invited a handful of full-time private sector trainers that aren't deep within the NRA echo chamber onto the committee, and we've been asked to put forward ideas. We're working on a kind of a list of things of here's what needs to get better, and here's how we can do it better to try. And there's an interest from the new leadership and the new attitude there. I think the possibility exists to improve and get things back into a better state. So that's one of the reasons I said yes, because if it had been 3 years ago, I would have said no. But with things the way they are now, I think there's more receptive people on the other end of the line that saying okay. And so I'm actually going to go look at your little Discover website because one of the ideas that we had was to start recommending non-NRA resources as additional knowledge for people, particularly instructors, to encourage some of the there's NRA instructors out there that kind of like the 99% of gun owners, they got their basic NRA pistol certificate and they're out there teaching and they haven't shot a match or taken a class or done any professional development learning since then. And that's high on my list of we can do better to get many of those folks further along the chain because who knows what they're telling people.
right. Yeah, you're 100% correct, and I've seen that, and I think we can all agree if your number one thing in the list of your pedigree is that you're an NRA certified instructor, that is not going to make me want to come to your class.
Right.
If that's your number one accolade, that is a starting point.
Yes.
And the NRA does a good job of the safety and the protocols and the kind of things you need to think about as an instructor. But it's just a starting point. I mean, like you, it sounds like I continue to go to classes even now. I retired from teaching a couple of years ago just because, as the CEO of a company, I don't really need the additional liability of.
Right.
Um, it's not the liability I'm concerned about; it's the exposure. My attorney friends explained to me is it doesn't matter if you're right or wrong. It's available. And if you have insurance and they decide to come after you, the insurance, instead of fighting it, just pays out. So that's kind of the way that whole thing works. But I think it's great that you're doing that. And I would really appreciate it that you would, offer up the fact that, hey, there's still a lot of viable traditional double action guns out there. People do like them. I believe that there's somewhat of a resurgence of people that like traditional double action guns. They like hammer fired guns for a variety of reasons. And so having part of the curriculum be able to teach instructors how to do that and how to teach DA correctly and how to, let people go through the process. I think that would be great. I highly, highly would appreciate if you would pass that along to the leadership at the NRA and to that, because that would make a big difference, I think.
Yeah, it's you don't see it on YouTube. The YouTube influencers, there's other than you, there's really no YouTube influencer talking about here's how you use this outside of look at this new cool gun I got with a 2-pound single action trigger. And oh yeah, it's got this other thing, but don't worry about that. And here we're going to do a 2-second bill drill. And there's so much of the online gun culture has become that. And I think far less of it is on here's how you use this thing in the real world as much to here's how I go and show off on the range. I'm not sure that's really helping. It's
Right. No, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. That is a thing, and that is an issue. There are some guys out there that are doing great stuff other than me with traditional double action guns. But they don't just, most of them don't just do, traditional double action guns. I mean,
right.
Mike Seeklander has a
Oh,
whole
sure.
thing that he does on shooting Berettas, because he, so I believe he still works with Wilson Combat on that stuff. And a lot of the, there's a lot of guys that do that really good stuff there. A good friend of mine, Justin Dial, is a
Oh,
retired
yeah,
still
sure.
works. Marsoc, that guy can run a traditional double action gun like very, very good.
Yeah,
Like
he was at Rangemaster TechCon this year. I went to his session, and we use a couple of his drills actually in my program because he has brilliant little 5 and 10 round drills that are information rich,
oh yeah, he's great, great.
high quality drills.
Yeah, I just talked to him this afternoon for like 45 minutes, I think. I probably wore him out, because like a lot of friends like that, we can talk for a long time. But he calls me and sends me a lot of really cool drills. He's got a ton of them, by the way. He comes
Yes.
up with just all kinds of good stuff. And several of them I used in my classes, right up till the end. Like anyway, the point is, there's a lot of good guys out there that run traditional double action guns, and they teach traditional double action guns, but I think that there are fewer. My opinion is on this as well. You have to have, because I've got, like, so when I did the PX4 thing and I started talking about how great the PX4 was, I got a number of people that contacted me that had bought a PX4 and absolutely loved it. That was their first gun and it was great. And I bought it for this reason or that reason, blah, 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 this, whatever. But they got made fun of by all their friends. You got to buy a Glock. What is that thing? That thing's ugly. You go to this, you go to that, you got to whatever. And they caved to the peer pressure and went and
Right.
got a striker fired gun. And the marketing that has been put, and by the way, the same thing with the gun companies, they had to cave to the peer pressure and finally all fell to do a polymer frame striker fired gun so that they could try to compete in the market. And a lot of them
Sure.
did not want to do it for all the reasons that I've discussed already. Okay. They were like, I don't know about this single action gun with no safety. I mean, because they understood the mechanics of it. But the general public looks and it looks just like these other guns. They can't tell. The trigger's great though. So I love it. Right.
Yeah.
The peer pressure to go to a polymer frame striker fired gun from the gun community is extremely high. It is
Right. Well, and now it's gone back around to now you have to have a polymer single action, right?
oh yeah,
2011.
Without picking on any particular company, there's a whole new wave of these double stack. I came up in Austin when Chip and Sandy and Virgil were originally designing the STI or TRI, or I have a pair of grips that say
fair voice. Yeah,
CMC. I have a CMC pair of grips for the Chip McCormick company back when, I mean, the original frames were CMC and they changed all that stuff. I was there around those people for all of that because they'd come shoot our local USPSA matches and they'd bring all the new stuff, and all of a sudden 30 years later, it's like everybody suddenly discovered, oh, look at this, which is great. All those companies are in my backyard pretty much. But it's the same thing. It's all the cool kids now. Now it's not, you've got to have a Glock to be cool. You've got to have one of these other things. There's a couple of companies, and yeah, there's very much the trend and the flexing on
yep.
the tours, as the kids say on the internet, and all of that.
I'm not mad about it, because now, like, everybody's like, oh yeah, this gun, I mean, I'll say it, Staccato, this gun is cool. And they make beautiful, nice guns, like nothing against them. But the
Right.
good news is the weight has now gone up. So nobody can tell me my gun's heavy anymore.
True.
I'm like, that gun's too heavy, that's too heavy, the Beretta's too heavy, and I'm like, oh, really? That's the kaya, it's not light. Come
right.
on.
Well, if you want your flat, if you want fast split times for your bill drill, then you want a heavy front end, you know.
Uh,
And again, that goes back to why I need that. Well, I got to look good on the internet. I got to have a fast splits on my bill drill. So now I need a heavy gun and I need a ported heavy gun. Yeah, I've got some of those in my safe from 1995. You know,
mhm.
here we go
I
around and
know
around in circle again.
there's a lot of truth to that. I shot my first competitive combat pistol match, if you will, in 1989 at a place called Flatwoods Outfitters in just outside of Jacksonville, North Carolina. So way back in the day. So
Yep. Yep. So it's,
Yeah,
I don't just like, go ahead.
I'm just sitting here thinking this may be the easiest episode I've ever recorded because once we introduced you to the guys and got you started going, like every point that I had on my list of things that I wanted to get to, you two have hit it, covered it. I'm going to echo a couple of them. Ernest, I was saved from what probably would have been a termination incident by the double action trigger on a night where I full-heartedly went into a building that housed a nursing school because I found the front door broken open by myself and was clearing the hallway and almost torched off around into a medical mannequin that was in a room with like a backlit thing when I came around the corner and if I had been carrying a Glock, I might would have torched that round off. Um, I tell that to rookies now. Like, one, don't go in the building by yourself.
yep,
Two, here are these
that's
other
the mistake.
things. Um, Thinking back to when I was training people back in the early 2000s when the agency carried uh, the TDA Smith, we had it built in to every one of our range commands, scan, decock, everything. And we were habituated in saying it. All of our personnel were habituated in doing it. And I can't recall, but maybe one instance of a person going back to the holster with the gun still cocked in single action. I can think of a couple where they took the safety lever down to decock it and they didn't push it back up to double action and they
Mhm.
went back. But the holsters we carried, you couldn't snap it into place if the safety lever was down, and that would be their thing. They'd have to pull up and fix it, and that's not a huge deal.
Mhm.
Um, Fast forward 20 years, and it started seeing a kind of a resurgence of TDAs and classes on the open enrollment market. It was hard to get people to decock the guns. And like I'd have to go stand by them for a little while,
Yep.
decock, decock, decock. But as the upswing in 2011 guns is hitting so hard, I'm seeing the same thing with the manual safety.
Oh yeah.
Seeing the exact same thing, and they're both the same problem. And Ernest hit on it. It's people that grew up in the Glock world, striker fire world, don't know how to teach those other two things, and they think they do, but they don't. And I'm going to give a case in point here of John Holston, who is a mutual acquaintance of each of us, uh, was teaching at a big national conference that I think both of you have been involved in. I don't want to say it because I don't want to give it a bad name because it's a great event, um, where John had a group of students that came to his block immediately from one of the competition side
Right.
instructors who was teaching, as Karl said, take the safety off as you acquire the grip in the holster. And they come over and they start doing that in John's class. And he's like, whoa, what's going on here? Starts trying to teach them how to correctly do it. And he got a lot of pushback and resistance from those students. Well, so and so in the other bay just said this is how you're supposed to do it.
Mhm.
And I've had that same discussion with a couple of the modern competitive guys. And it's like, I'm not going to tell you how to go shoot your USPSA match, but this is a problem in the gun toting world. And I
When I went
appreciate,
to RO school in 1988, we were
yeah,
told to watch for that specifically
yeah,
and to warn competitors back when everybody shot 1911s
Right.
It was part of RO school to say, if they're doing this, they need to get warned at a
Yeah.
minimum. That if
But
we
I,
say
I just
filming,
appreciate the fact that even though like Ernest is coming from the pro TDA side, Carl's here to talk, not negative TDA, but some of what
no,
he
I'm
uses
negative,
the
but that's okay.
shortcome. Yeah. Well, I don't think you're saying anything that's negative.
Mhm.
But it's funny how you both come to some of the same conclusions. I'm just enjoying the fact that we're having a reasonable discussion.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. The
I,
interesting thing, and I want to clarify the point. This is, since we're talking about I think we should follow through in case
Uh,
anybody's listening and talking about that. In my opinion, on a 1911, a gun with a frame mounted safety like that, my belief is that the safety comes off as you're going to the target, at least when the gun gets level. Okay,
mhm.
at least when it's level with the target, but as you're going to the target, but before your support hand gets into position. And why that is important, it's not right at the very end, because what happens is at speed, under duress, if this hand is screwed up and you get a little too high, you can't get the safety off because it gets in the way of this thumb pushing the safety down. So it's a sequence critical event kind of thing. You draw the gun, thumbs on the safety as you're going towards the target, or at the earliest when the gun's level with the target. Okay, the safety comes
yeah,
off, and this is all happening very
Mhm.
quickly. But before your support hand rolls into position, you want that safety to come off because of that factor. Because I've seen a lot of people do it when they start trying to shoot in 1911. They'll throw that left hand gets up there, and then they try to take the safety off, and their left hand or their support hand is in the way
block
of
it.
pushing the safety down, and then the gun doesn't come off safe, and we have, even worst case scenario, right? Well, not, I wouldn't say worst case scenario, but really bad if you need the gun to go off really bad.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah.
the way I
Yeah, Carl.
explain that is the muzzle has to be in a direction that you're okay with launching around, which is basically the same thing. Because if they're having to shoot from retention, they're not going to have both hands on the gun. So as
Sure.
soon as the muzzle's out and on target,
Mhm.
then the safety can come off, uh, and then it's consistent with if you're shooting it very, like this weekend. I'm teaching an extreme close quarters shooting class, and we're going to have to deal with that very issue.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I
Uh,
completely agreed, but I just thought it was valuable that we followed all the way through with that, because somebody
Yes.
might be going, so when do I take it off safe?
Right.
I know the
there you
question is
go.
going to be that.
Yeah. My saying for both safety gun, a pistol with a manual safety and for like teaching ARs is muzzle on target, safety off, muzzle off target, safety on.
Mhm.
And when you accomplish both of those, it's pretty well to internalize. But we see it with like the academy cadets and new hires that are coming through, and they're learning their initial, like this is the first time they've ever shot guns on a Glock. And then we start trying to move them over to teach patrol rifle and getting them to work the manual safety on the patrol rifle uh, takes some doing.
Mhm.
Um, you know, I don't remember that being as much of an issue when we were shooting the traditional double action guns and everybody was doing a decock to go back to the holster. It was the same thing. Oh, I came off target. I decocked my rifle basically this feat just by putting the safety on.
I always
Um,
think it's comical, Lee. That's a very good point, that guys will say, well, they won't remember to decock. But if you start talking about patrol rifle, you start talking about AR-15s, everybody
mhm,
agrees the gun comes off the target, the safety needs to go back on.
yeah,
And so we can teach people to do that, but our people are way too dumb to remember to decock. It's like, come on, we can't have both. Like if they're expected to be able to do this thing and operate a
yeah,
safety, they can operate a
yeah,
decock.
Yeah, the reality that in the gun rights area that we're in now is the
mhm,
reality is it takes more reps and more time on the gun to get to practical proficiency than the permitless carry advocates. Um,
yeah,
it's an endless battle between the rights part and the proficiency part. And all these issues that we're bringing up are coming from you probably need more supervised repetition. And the
Mhm.
saddest thing about all that is just uh, I'm not talking out of school too much, that as permitless carry has expanded, even the number of people that are getting the very minimum NRA
yeah,
basic pistol course is plummeting as the attitude of the populace is that I don't even need that. And so I don't know that any of the problems that we're talking about are going to get better beyond the scope of the 1%. That they want to go straight from, I have a gun, to look at me doing my 1 second draw and my 2 second bill drill on Instagram with little concern in between. And it makes me worry a little bit, just because I think online training and virtual training and all that is good, but if you're practicing by yourself and you're doing a bad thing with your trigger finger or your thumb and the levers and the controls on your gun, the simulators don't call you out for that. And so
Correct.
everybody's excited about the future of all this virtual simulator stuff, except that there's nobody there to say, hey, if you do that with a real gun, you're gonna, shoot your parts off.
Right. No,
Yeah.
I think it's a valid point. I would back up to the point you made earlier, and I think it's a very valid point about when you have someone that is, for lack of a better term, elderly, hand strength issues, arthritis, all of the things that we run into there. That is a very viable situation. But what I would say is that for a lot of them, the discussion I think needs to be had with them is, are you really going to carry this gun? Or is this for your home protection? Because those are two entirely different things. If they're going to actually carry the gun on their body every day, then
Yeah.
obviously a handgun is the right answer. But I think for a lot of them, they would be better served with something that was shoulder fired versus having a handgun on the nightstand. Because hand strength is a big thing when it comes to manipulating and shooting a handgun well, both from a accuracy standpoint and a reliability standpoint, as well as aiming the gun, in a quick situation. So,
The problem we're in now is everyone is convinced that they need a quote unquote truck gun. And so their solution is they don't carry the gun, they leave it in the console or the glove box, usually without a round in the chamber. And again, I interact with these people more often than I want to. That's their solution. And so it doesn't matter what the action design of the gun is, because their thought is, I'm gonna, under stress, I'm gonna open my glove box, fish this thing out, rack the slide, and get into this rolling gunfight in my vehicle, when they haven't thought through any of the variables involved. I had an article in the Shooting Illustrated on the NRA magazine about that recently, but there's the Filster people are doing a car holster evaluation on video that I'm eager to see. That they're testing the crashing cars and seeing if guns come flying out of these car holsters. Because that's another new trend that everybody's like, oh, I got to be ready to gunfight from my car. So yeah, I mean, in a certain sense, all the good training, and we can show you how to run this gun correctly. There has to be somebody on the other end to care.
Oh man, back in my chief deputy days, I had a guy show up at the sheriff's office with basically a big drink cup that he had designed with like a slot in the lid to put the pistol in. And he
Yeah.
was like saying, you put this in your cup holder. When you go to get into your car, you take your gun out of the holster and you stick it in this drink cup in your cup holder while you're driving. And then when you get out, you put it back in. And I guess the sheriff could see the look on my face. He gave me a signal to get up and just walk out of the office, because the guy was from a local family and everything. He's like, he knew I was just about to go nuts on all the reasons
Lose your mind.
that was wrong. It's just the truck gun thing.
Let me
Before
throw
we
out one. Go ahead.
sure go ahead, go ahead.
I was going to throw out one last topic so
Uh-huh.
we can bring this thing to a peaceful stop. One of the articles that's been going around is that I think it was Simon Golob wrote it, but I know Seeklanders talked about it, that you shouldn't use striker fired guns for appendix carry. And that's the other hot topic of the day that's floated around. And that's one that I have mixed thoughts on. And so I'm going to throw it to Ernest, and I'm pretty sure I know what he's going to say, but go ahead.
So, one of the reasons that I do really like traditional double action guns is the fact that in appendix carry, I have positive control of the firing mechanism when I'm holstering the gun. When I put
Mhm.
my thumb, I'm going to put my thumb on the back of almost anything that I'm holstering. And that's been a habit of mine for a really long time. And with a traditional double action gun, I have control of that. If I do carry a striker, and I have carried striker fired guns because we used to, we kind of shut it all down, but we used to work on Glocks and we did some stuff on there and direct milling and all that. We kind of gave that up because everybody works on those guns. So it's just not worth our effort to go after that market. But we do sell what's called a striker control device. I don't know if you're
Oh, that's
familiar.
right. You have the gadget thing
Yeah,
now.
the gadget. Yep, yep. So we manufacture and sell those, and with a Glock at least, which is not a fully tensioned striker, by the way. That's an important
Right.
point that people may not know. The Glock is one of the few striker fired guns on there, and the way the market has gone after that gun is trying to make the trigger better than a Glock. Because there's not much else you can argue with on a Glock, so they can say,
Right.
oh, ergonomics, this, whatever, but let's make the trigger better, and then we can say it's better than a Glock because the trigger's better. And the way they do that is by pulling the striker all the way to the rear, so very
Sure.
little doesn't. It's a better quote better trigger.
Right.
Um, so I have carried them, but I want a striker control device on there because then I can put my thumb on that thing when I'm holstering it. Because people say I hear it all the time. It's the bravado thing of, well, keep your booger hook off the bang switch, bro. This kind of thing,
Mhm.
right? And a lot of people don't understand it's not just your trigger finger that causes problems.
Oh,
There's other things that can cause problems with a striker fired gun specifically. Drawstring tabs, t-shirt material, all of that kind of stuff. I have been on the range at a competition when a guy was holstering his Glock. He did everything right. His finger was straight. I could see him doing it and watched his t-shirt bunch up into the trigger guard because he was carrying it inside the waistband holster at IDPA match, doing all the things like you're supposed to, and
right.
he ended up shooting himself, like trimming his butt basically, or putting a hole in and out of his butt. And he
We've
didn't
had
he didn't do
two
anything
of
wrong.
those on our range.
Yeah, yeah, he didn't
Strong
do
side
anything wrong, and
IWB.
I saw the
And
RO too, by the way. The RO was like, no. He was trying to move in to stop the guy when he was holstering it. It was just too late. You know how that is. Like
we had one guy, the bullet went in the pants, back out the pants, never touched tissue, but
Ooh.
literally like a bullet diameters away. And our AAR on that was, and one of the instructors was watching the same deal. We saw him finger off the trigger going in. It hooked on something in the holster. It was a low quality Kydex holster bought off of Amazon, and because an influencer, recommended it on YouTube. Uh,
Yeah.
But to your point, that is a thing. So the only thing I would say there is, and I mean, plenty of people carry appendix, and there are some guys out there that teach really good classes specific to appendix. Theoretically, if you're holstering correctly with an appendix holster, um, you might lose control of your bowels, but you shouldn't be bleeding if the gun goes off.
yeah.
If you're leaning back and doing what you're supposed to do. The problem is that a lot of people physically, that is very difficult for them to do because they have extra around the middle. And so when
Yes.
they go to holster in an appendix position, it forces the gun in a position where it's pointing back towards your body. So that's
Yep.
obviously a very dangerous situation. It needs to be
We had
addressed
to
by
put
the individual that thinks that they're going to carry that way. What
Yep.
I would
We had to
say
put
is
pictures of
that
that in our range safety briefing to say, this is how we want you to reholster, and
mhm.
this is okay, and this is not, so that it
Well,
gets
I have
shown to every class, and we can, in court, if we had to, pull out the slides and say, everybody saw this
mhm.
because of that concern. And it's a real thing.
And I have made people in my classes go change holsters. I'm like, you're shooting a Glock and you're pointing the gun at yourself every time you holster, and we're not doing this. So I've made them go change holsters. But the point I would make is that I have also seen people carrying strong side carry do just as horrific things, fishing the gun back into the holster. I have watched them point the gun cross pelvis as they
Mhm.
fish this thing back into the holster. So
Yeah.
just appendix doesn't fix the problem, because if you cross pelvis shoot yourself, you're in deep trouble too.
Yeah.
So it's not, appendix is obviously super popular. It's my preferred way to carry. But I think that you can carry with a striker fired gun, but I think you need to holster that thing like it's a small nuclear device if you don't have any way to control the firing mechanism.
Yeah, I have a gadget on. I have a Gen 3 Glock 19 loaner gun for students, and it has one of the original gadgets on there. And
Yeah.
so when they borrow it, it's like, this is what this does. This is why it's doing what it does, and this is something we added, and here's why. And again, I think that goes back to the more we have this conversation, the more I realize there's some of these issues really need to be addressed to the broader instructor audience, because I mean, my team, we're kind of up to speed on these things, but I guarantee you there's a lot of garden variety indoor range carry permit trainers probably not sharing those concerns. So
There's lots of government sector out there trainees
uh,
that
all I can
the
do
same
is recommend changes to the NRA program for reasons.
yeah.
And this
One of
has
the
been great
issues
because it's
that with
given me more things to put on the list, and with probably with greater importance than some of the things I was going to put on there. So,
Yeah.
so this is good.
yeah.
Yeah, I was having a discussion with a fellow law enforcement firearms instructor, and we were talking about, and he's good at what he does. Uh, he was looking at buying a staccato, and I told him, so I'm kind of leaning towards. I've been looking at these Beretta 92s that Langdon sells, and I'm looking at some of that stuff, and uh, one of our mutual friends had loaned me one to experiment with, and he said, I just don't know about that double action, single action, having two different triggers on the gun. I said, well, I'm actually thinking about asking Ernest just to make me one that's just double action. Get rid of the single action and give me the doubles. Because my ideal dream gun will be a Smith& Wesson 19 uh, semi-automatic. But
We've done that. I've done a
yeah,
couple of those. I have a
yeah,
couple of those that are floating around there.
yeah,
We call them a 19 shot K frame.
yeah,
They're double action only. And the
yeah,
good news is, well, because they're double action only and the firing pin is solid all the way through,
yeah,
I can actually go lighter on the hammer spring because I
yeah,
don't lose energy from that segmented firing pin with the
yeah,
safety. And we're getting like 5.5 pound double actions. They are beautiful. And
yeah,
there's a couple of people out there that have them. And you put a
yeah,
Meccar 18 round magazine in the thing, and all of a sudden you have a 19 round like K frame with a
yeah,
trigger on it. It would be as good as any of the PPC guns from back in the day. I mean, they're
yeah,
beautiful, and you shoot them just fine. I mean, it's hard to get teen splits out of them, but
yeah,
realize the fact that people don't stand still when you shoot at them.
yeah,
The splits don't seem to be as important.
yeah. Yeah, that's oh, we just stumbled onto another one. Spread your shots out to spread the damage. I'm like, they're going to take care of that themselves.
Yeah.
I
Yes,
want to shoot when
yes.
it's a stationary piece of paper. I want to shoot as tight as I possibly can. Oh
Yeah.
gosh, that
People
could be a
don't
whole
stand still
nother
when you
episode
shoot
right
at them,
there.
and you probably won't be standing still either.
Yeah. So with that, I just want to throw it to you, Ernest, just to talk double action or traditional level action guns. What marketplace stuff? Anything you want to mention, product
Um,
lines?
yeah, no, we've got some really cool stuff come in. We've been doing some science. We joke we're doing science. We're going to come out with a hammer. I'll say it now. It's going to be launched within a couple of weeks. We actually have in here a wire EDM hammer that we changed. We played with the center of gravity on the hammer. We didn't just, put holes in
Mhm.
it, make it light, and do all that other kind of stuff. And it is going to allow us to go even lighter in hammer spring pressure. So we'll be able to have a really light double action. It's wire DM hammer. The single action will be great. And it actually, on top of that, improves lock time. It does everything better. It literally does every single thing better. So now you will be able to have, because again, the trigger reach, if people can barely reach the trigger, but it's a 10-pound trigger, it doesn't matter because they still can't pull it, right?
Right.
Right.
If it's a 6-pound trigger, that's a whole different story.
Yeah.
So we've got that. So that's really cool. We got a lot of other stuff coming, but don't want to talk about that yet. We're pretty good about not talking about things until we can deliver. The last thing I'll say on TDA, this is a kind of really interesting story because this ties into the staccato. It was pre-staccato, but I've got a good friend of mine that was training to go to the Gunsight alumni match. Are you guys familiar with the gas match at Gunsight? I mean, you
Coached
guys
one of my students who went last year. He was,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think he was 5th or 6th in the match this time. But yeah, I helped him spin up to get ready to go shoot that thing.
But he was practicing. He wanted to win the Cooper's Cup, right?
Yep.
Actually, here on the shelf, they gave it to me. So he was practicing and he was shooting. At the time, it was an STI, and he was, doing well, but not doing as well as he wanted to do. And he, at the range practicing, he said, "Like, I'm going to put this aside. Oh, I'm going to pull out my Elite LTT gun." This is pre-Red Dot, by the way. This is a few years back. And he, right out of the gate, shoots his PR on it, shoots his best he's ever shot on it. And he was like, "That's just wrong. That can't be right. What the heck?" Does it again, shoots another PR, switches back to his wide body 1911, whatever, scores drop back down. And the thing that a lot of people don't understand is once you know how to shoot and you know how to shoot a double action, that first shot is not any harder at all because you've got all of that presentation time and sight alignment time to finish rolling through that trigger. And once you learn how to steer the sights with that double action trigger pull, the guys that are good at it, they end up being more accurate with that first shot than they are with the single action. Because what happens is with the single action or the light trigger pull, we've all done this, including me. You pull out, you go, "There it is, it's perfect now," and you give it that. You give it that, right there at the end. I got to finish it, and you can't do that with the DA gun. You just got to roll through it.
Well, people do. People do. My
People
friend
do,
on
but
Wednesday night matches.
again,
I watch his
preface
trigger finger, and he's trying to go now with the DA, which is why things go wrong.
But nobody's taught him how to pull a DA trigger pull. He hasn't run the drills. He's trying to go up there and shoot the double like it's a single.
Yep.
And that doesn't work.
Yep.
Okay.
Right.
But my point is that he ended up going and winning the Cooper Cup with his Beretta.
Nice.
Which is kind of crazy because, if you remember, Jeff called the Beretta the crunch ticker. He hated
Oh, yeah.
it. And the funny thing about the story is another guy, and I don't know if it's not any secret. There are two guys from LA Sheriffs. The other guy went from LA Sheriffs, also trying to win a Cooper Cup. The two of them tied for first place, both shooting Beretta Elite LTTs.
Nice.
So the SHOT Show that following year, they brought the trophy and made a plaque for me, and all they made a big deal out of it. And like, this is really cool. And he was like, "I swallowed the red pill," and all that kind of stuff. But it was an understanding. What he was like, "Look, once you know how to run these guns, once you understand it, you can do amazing things with a traditional double action gun." And I would argue in a lot of cases, you can shoot it better but the perception is we've been told, "I've got to have the same trigger pull every time because it's too complicated to pull two trigger pulls, and I'll forget the decock, and it's too long, and it's this and it's that, and it's slow." That's the other one that's funny, that it's slow, and you've got plenty of time to pull the trigger while you're mounting and presenting the gun. There's plenty of time there, right?
Yeah.
If they're taught how to do it and they work at it.
That's right.
And same thing with your gun. I don't know it's probably 6-pound double and 2-pound single or something.
Probably 6.5 on most of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the singles, the singles on our eyes are right at 4 pounds. They're 3.5 to
Oh,
4.
wow. Okay. All
We
right.
don't go down to a 2
Some of
pound.
the gamer guns that I see,
We
not your guns.
can go down to 2 pounds, but I would not advise it. That's just silly.
Right.
There's no
That's,
need for that. So,
I think there's a wide gap, and that's one of the things. The factory trigger on the Glock, the gap between that and the tuned up trigger is not as big as the difference in the factory double versus your tuned one, because it goes from like 10 to 6, right?
mhm. Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's a huge mathematical change, and particularly the difficulty. I had a student last year that brought an old traditional double action 5949 series, one of those awful Smith and Wesson guns I never want to see again. And he was probably 70, and he literally left the gun behind at my range after class because it was just he couldn't handle remembering doing all the stuff. He got cognitively overloaded. We handed him a Glock. He got through the class. He did good, and he literally left the gun in my gun safe for 6 months before he came back. And he came back with a striker fire gun and shot it better. And so, that's they're not for everybody. It was more than he was willing to work at. He didn't realize he needed to do all the extra things. And then mechanically, it was beyond his physical ability to run the factory trigger on it. And so, that's kind of, I'll end where I started, which was that guy. I said, you need try this, try my Gen 3 Glock 19 with the gadget on it. And all of a sudden he's like, oh, yeah, I can hit stuff now. And I have no idea what he did with that other gun. I told him to find some gun hipster that thought that was a good gun that wanted to buy it and sell it to him for too much money, because it was not a good gun for him.
I can't disagree. I 100% believe that that is true. My concern is that that guy that can't remember to decock and use the levers is also the guy that's not going to remember to keep his finger off the trigger.
Probably so. Probably true.
That is
Probably
my
true.
concern.
Yeah,
If
he was not,
he's cognitively overloaded from remembering to decock a gun,
Yeah.
and how to pull the trigger, he's going to be the guy running around with the Glock with his finger on the trigger.
very
And
possible.
that
Very
is
possibly so.
therein lies that is my number one concern for the
Sure.
average guy. And again, if you're talking about the top tier guy, right, the guy that's got all the training, that is literally, an asset to the community, you can give him anything. You could give
Sure.
him 686 and he would get it done. It doesn't matter what it is. So that's not what we're talking about. The problem we have in the gun culture is we look at these firearms instructors and these Instagram guys and the guys at Delta Force and the rest of them, which are great Americans, and they're doing all this stuff, and they go, well, that's what I need. I need what that guy got, because I'm just like that, bro. I got this. And that is, in my opinion, a problem, because everybody's not like those guys.
Yeah.
So,
Karl, you got anything upcoming that you want to let the audience know about?
Sure. The coolest things I have going on. Number one, I'm hosting Greg Ellifritz, whose time on Earth is limited, sadly. Hosting him at my range for a knife instructor class and a medical class in August. I've got John Holshin coming in September for his neuro-based class. I have Chuck Pressburg coming for no fail pistol, and Tom Givens coming for his instructor program the end of October. In addition to all my little short local stuff that I do, I've got a 3-day weekend the end of October, which is force on force instructor, a full day of force on force scenarios, and then Sunday is live fire, including low light. So people that are keen to travel to train with me could come see me the last weekend of October for a 3-day weekend that's going to have both the scenarios and the live fire. And my force on force instructor class teaches people how to write and run scenarios, which is something that very few people do, and fewer people teach how to actually script a scenario and run it properly for armed citizens. So that's kind of my signature course that I travel with. And I've got, as I said, that 3-day weekend in October. So those that are not local to me that want to come travel, those are the things that I've got going on.
Well, I'm going to both promote and detract from your class the last weekend in October. I'll say that I've taken Karl's student level scenario class that he's talking about there. Extremely, extremely well done. One that I've taken that would rival that would be Fletzy's use of force instructor class, in which they have a paid company of actors to come in to be all the role players and stuff. And you're doing it on the federal government's budget. Yeah, that's kind of hard to beat. But as far as out there in the open enrollment world, Carl, I legitimately, I'm not blowing smoke just because you're sitting here. Legitimately think that's the best course out there in that venue.
It's
Uh,
the hardest class to fill.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Everybody wants high-speed performance pistol 2-second bill drill classes, but put you
Yeah.
in a scenario where you're in a 7-Eleven and you got to make a
Yeah.
use of force decision. Uh,
Yeah.
Apparently, that's not cool or sexy, even though that's probably what the skill you need more than anything else.
Oh, yeah.
Unfortunately, that class is the same weekend as the cognitive conclave.
Oh
Uh,
no!
the cognitive conclave is myself, John Hearn, John Holshin, and Eric Gelhaus, and that will be at the Red Hill Range in Martin, Georgia, the last weekend in October. Uh, the link to register is floating around on four of our social media accounts, and I think it's on Holshin's webpage.
I can
Um,
offer my January repeat of that material in New Orleans as an alternative.
there you go.
There
So
you go.
Yeah,
Saturday, you can do both.
uh, yeah, do both.
there you
Uh,
go.
the Cognitive Conclave is an event that is focused on the mental side of shooting and use of force decision making along those lines. We have 30 spots total for the class because that's the most we can fit in the classroom in case of inclement weather. The last time I talked to Holshin, who is handling the registration for this, we've already sold 18 spots in that.
Great.
And 18 this far out, I'm pretty optimistic that one's going to sell out.
Oh
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
So if you're on the bubble for it and you're thinking about it, get into it. That and the Rangemaster reunion in December in Nashville are the only two things I've got coming up that are on the open market. Um, I need to get back out there and start offering classes again, but teaching all day, every day for the full time job has just made that unattractive on the weekends to a certain extent.
I
Um,
understand.
uh, and I do live in Northeast Georgia. There's this thing called college football that's about to get kicked off, and it takes up. And I live in the Athens area, which is the University of Georgia. And if there's a home football game, you can't get a hotel room within an hour. You can't get in and out on the roads, and so that
Right.
complicates stuff for this time of year. And it's just brutal hot, you know, right now anyway. Um, but guys, I thoroughly enjoyed this episode. Like I said, this may have been the easiest one I've ever recorded because I had to do nothing absolutely other than send you to the email and hit the start button. I did nothing tonight. And sometimes it's like I'm trying to think of something to ask the guest, everything. And I'm like, well, I would have asked about that. I would have asked about that. Oh, that's a point I was going to bring up. I had it in my notes on my phone. Absolutely fantastic discussion. Especially appreciate the fact of how reasonable you two were with each other.
Yeah,
That
no reason
seems
not to be.
right, but that
I
seems to be
respect
something.
Carl's body of work. He's done a lot of great stuff. I got nothing bad. I mean, I understand where he's coming from.
Yeah,
We disagree. I don't have to be mad at him
right,
about it.
right. But that seems to be something that is getting lost, I guess, in the world in general, but especially in the gun world, which is like if anybody takes any kind of differing opinion or you start asking questions, all of a sudden it becomes uh we've got to hate each other. We've got to have, you got to unfriend each other on Facebook and block each other. And all the, respective camps get formed and we argue and shout across each other.
There's
Um,
the
I,
generational stuff. There's
yeah,
you're an old FUD. You don't know what you're talking about. You're not cool
yeah,
because you don't follow so and so. And yeah,
yeah.
it's I don't post as much on social media as I should for marketing purposes,
Hmm.
but part of that is I'm very selective now. I try to be careful with what I put out there, and I try to put high quality content out there when I do it, but yeah, it's a challenge. The culture has changed, and there's a lot of stuff about it that I don't think is good.
I was involved in a discussion with a coworker this last week, and we couldn't come to terms on what we were saying to each other. And then finally I said to him, I said, we're saying pretty much the same thing. We're just using different terminology and we're getting hung up on a little key point in our difference here. But I think we're actually on the same team on this. And I think a lot of the stuff in the gun, we're all on the same team, but you get the emotions invested in it and everything else. And I didn't hear Karl say anything tonight about TDA is bad, but I heard him say, like, for this group of students, it can be problematic. And I didn't hear Ernest say, if you don't shoot TDA, you're stupid.
Right.
I didn't hear him say that. And I don't know if it's possible to put this episode on the internet because that just might not be accepted.
We're not arguing and being assholes. Then how can it be any good?
Yeah, I'm at a little bit of a loss here. And I knew it was going to be a friendly discussion, but I'm just extremely pleased with how this went. And guys, thank you for coming on and doing this episode tonight. Thank you for taking the time out to do this. I hope the audience enjoys it as much as I did. And, to the audience, we understand that your most important asset is your time. Thank you for choosing to spend it with us.